Snap! Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is out. I love Dark Moon on the 3DS. Why not check it out? Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Alright, let's see here. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Obviously, I want a physical version. What? What is that? $60? Oh, hell no. Nintendo's gone crazy. Roll the dang intro. In celebration of the release of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, I have decided that it only made sense to give the original its own video because I think it deserves it, and totally not because I can't afford the HD remake. Yeah, anyway, if you've seen my video where I ranked all the Luigi's Mansion games, go check that out by the way. You already know my opinion on this game. I absolutely adore it, and when I heard it was getting a remake, I was ecstatic. I personally feel like this game is crazy underrated, so I was happy that Nintendo was giving it some attention. Do I think the remake is a tad overpriced? Yes. And this sucks because most people don't have $60 they can use to buy a remake. I'm getting off track. So, without further ado, let's get on to the video. Starting with some backstory, of course. Okay, so the year is 2011. People have been playing the DS for some time at this point, and Luigi's Mansion is a name that you don't hear come up very often. It came out years ago, during a completely different console generation. It was certainly still a fantastic game, but it had just been slowly forgotten, like most games unfortunately are. See, it was originally meant to be a tech demo for the GameCube, so I'm sure at the time, Nintendo really didn't see any reason to expand on the franchise. Let's just say, people would have loved a new Luigi's Mansion game, but nobody was really thinking we were going to get one anytime soon. That was until E3 2011. Almost entirely out of nowhere, Nintendo had announced this. We would be getting a new installment in the Luigi's Mansion series. This was absolutely insane. People were going crazy. I mean, we were actually getting another Luigi's Mansion game. From what we saw, the game visually looked amazing, especially for the 3DS, and was clearly pushing the system to its limits. The gameplay also looked fantastic, and it looked like it might even be better than the original Luigi's Mansion. We got to see Luigi explore these long hallways and small rooms while catching ghosts, and saying people were hyped is a massive understatement. They were seeing their favorite game on the GameCube return after over a decade, and I'm speaking from experience here. It was just surreal. I mean, the game looked great, Nintendo seemed to have put a lot of effort into it, and it was finally some more Luigi's Mansion. I mean, there was no chance this game could fail. Right? 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 Let's fast forward to 2013. The game is finally out. It flies off store shelves as old and new fans alike rush to finally play this game. So, what did people think of the game? Well, the reviews were kind of mixed. Most people liked the game on release, but you also had a relatively big chunk of people who didn't hate it but also didn't love it. The main complaint at the time was the fact that the open world, sort of Metrovania-esque gameplay of the first game had been swapped out for a sort of level or mission based format. Wait a second. I feel like I've seen this somewhere before. Anyway, many people loved this change, as the first game could be a bit confusing at times. But like I said before, many people did not like this change. As you can see, the game started off fairly light, but had its fair share of problems and haters. But you also had many people that loved it and saw it as nothing but an improvement. They had known that it would have been almost impossible for Nintendo to make a fully open world game on the 3DS, and anyway, they still liked the mission based gameplay. Oh, I also haven't mentioned that this game added multiplayer. This was a huge selling point, as you got to play the amazingly fun Scare Scraper with your friends and family. And I'm gonna mention it again. If you've seen my video where I ranked all the Luigi's Mansion games, you already know that I love the Scare Scraper. This was the first Luigi's Mansion game with multiplayer, and it was so good it was even brought back in Luigi's Mansion 3. Alright, I'm getting off track. Let's talk about something else. The game itself. Personally, I think the game is great. I would even go as far as to say it's the best in the series. But from what I've seen, most fans relatively regard this as the worst game in the series. From what I currently know, it seems that public opinion has shifted more towards the negative side. Do I think this is deserved? Absolutely not. But if you don't like the game, I can certainly see why. This game is very unique compared to the other games in the Luigi's Mansion franchise. And a lot of the people that played it grew up with the original. And people almost always enjoy the game that they grew up with much more, even if it's because they're looking at it through nostalgia tinted goggles. Even though my first experience with Luigi's Mansion was still with the original, I still seem to enjoy the sequel more. But there is certainly nothing wrong with liking the original more, as it is an amazing video game. Again, I'm getting off track. Okay, the game. Like I said before, it's vastly different from the original. Let me give you a small outline of the story. The Dark Moon, which calmed the ghosts and made them friendly even, has been broken into many pieces. So Egad recruits his old friend Luigi to track down all the pieces through many different mansions and areas. That's right, this game takes place in multiple different mansions. Many people dislike this, and I can sort of understand why, but I think that this adds nothing but good things. I have searched and searched, and I cannot find anything specific that people dislike about the fact that there are multiple mansions, other than the fact that it is different and can be a little jarring. There's nothing wrong with this opinion. In fact, I find it to be valid. Some people just prefer the single mansion format of the original. I just so happen to not be one of those people. Okay, enough of me talking about nonsense. Let's go over each of the mansions individually and try and see what people like and what people don't like. We start our ghost catching journey in the Gloomy Manor. This was clearly made to resemble the mansion from the first game, which a lot of people like. It's a dark, spooky mansion and plays the part of a tutorial or sort of beginner zone. Not much time is spent here, but the time that is spent here is mostly used up by learning the controls and how to efficiently capture ghosts. This is also where you find many things that will be extremely useful throughout the rest of our game. The most important of these things being the poltergust itself. It's an upgraded version of the one from the first game and is integral in your fight against these spectral beings. It's pretty much just a vacuum. You end in this area by fighting a giant spider and capturing your first possessor. These are the things that possess the various objects that will act as different bosses during your playthrough, by the way. The next area is the Haunted Towers. It has a sort of greenhouse aesthetic and is home to various plants. This is an area that I really think Nintendo's creativity shines in, as it is just brimming with fantastic design and wonder. This area is just such a treat to walk around in my opinion. This also happens to be the area where you fight my two favorite bosses, the Three Sisters and the Possessed Staircase. The third area that we will find Luigi in is the Old Clockworks. It seems to be an old clock factory, and it is the opposite of forgettable. It is very unique and has its own sort of old-timey western feel. The highlight is definitely the final boss though, as it is literally a giant clock face. The fourth area is the Secret Mine. It seems to be a sort of mine that has been overcome with ice and snow. This area is gorgeous, and there are many new and creative mechanics at play. Not to mention the puzzles in this area are perfect in my opinion. Next, we have the Treacherous Mansion. This is the longest and biggest mansion by far. It, in my opinion, fully embodies what Luigi's Mansion truly is. It's just Luigi exploring a dark and gloomy mansion while catching ghosts. Alright, the final area I'll talk about is the final boss fight. If you count it as an area, that is. This is where we fight a familiar foe. That's right, I'm talking about King Boo. Yes, he has returned from the first game for revenge. I like this boss fight. Is it anything groundbreaking? No, but it's certainly a good time. It's fun, and I feel like that's all it really needs to be to end this game that was nothing but a good time. Alright, we've briefly discussed each of the game's areas. Now let's talk about how the game plays. It's great. It, in my opinion, is nothing but an improvement on how the original played. One of the biggest things I noticed when comparing the two games' gameplay was the ghost catching process itself. So in the first game, if you wanted to catch a ghost, you had to turn off your light, or you had to turn your back to the ghost, either turn on your light at the last minute, or turn around at the last moment to stun the ghost. The ghost would then drag you around as you tried to catch it, no matter how well you resisted. This seems perfectly fine, and that's what I believed as well, until I played Dark Moon, that is. See, Dark Moon introduces two new mechanics into the ghost catching process, those being the strobe bulb and a sort of charge up meter. Let's talk about the strobe bulb first. See, this adds a new thingamabob to your flashlight. So, you know how in the first game you simply turned your light off and on? But with the strobe bulb, you get to charge up this sort of flash beam. So, why do I think of this as such a massive improvement? Well, I'll tell you. This makes you feel like you are truly wielding a real weapon against the ghosts. Charging your light feels really good and is extremely rewarding if you can charge it up fully. You can also visibly see Luigi sort of flinch when the charge is released, which really makes you feel the impact of that light beam. Something about it is just so satisfying compared to the flashlight in the first game. The second thing that I mentioned is the sort of charge up mechanic when catching ghosts. So, when you're vacuuming up a spectral being, you can see this little meter charging up above your head. When it reaches a certain point, you can press A to do a sort of quick and powerful suck that will take out a chunk of the ghost's health. This also feels extremely satisfying to pull off. It's a nice reward for efficiently catching ghosts. And I have one final thing I noticed. In Luigi's Mansion 1, the ghost would just kind of drag you around no matter what. It didn't matter if you were resisting properly or not. But in Dark Moon, if you properly resist, Luigi stands his ground. Now, you can take this in many different ways. But I see this as Nintendo showing that he's learning from his experience and is becoming a true ghost hunter. It also just feels really rewarding to see this ghost trying to get away and Luigi just hold strong. Alright, hopefully now you can see why I think Dark Moon handled ghost catching much better. Now, let's talk about the ghosts themselves. The main reason people prefer the original ghosts over this game's ghosts is the fact that they take on a much more cartoony and generic appearance. I prefer this, as the ghosts in the first game were just a little uncanny, and I wasn't really in love with any of their designs. The ghosts in this game, however, I feel perfectly embody what a ghost is. They are goofy, over-the-top creations that I am just in love with. Let's see, we have the Greenies, which are just your basic ghosts. They don't do anything special, but they sure do make for some funny cutscenes. Then we have the Slammers, which are big, red, beefy ghosts. They're the purple pigment of the ghost world. Next, we have the Hiders. They hide in objects and pop out to throw things at Luigi. Then we have the Gobbers, which are absolutely hilarious. They spit things at Luigi and are incredibly fat. We have Creepers, which hide as puddles and jump at Luigi when he walks over them. And last, we have Sneakers and Polterpups. Sneakers sneak up on Luigi, and Polterpups are just fun. Alright, last, we have the bosses. I absolutely love the bosses in this game. You have the mid-bosses in the form of the Poltergeists. These brainiacs have huge heads and go invisible to throw things at Luigi. They are simple, but they provide a nice break from the standard gameplay. We also have some other random bosses thrown in there like the Three Sisters, which are great. They just don't appear that often, which sucks because they are a great callback to the ghosts of the original, even if Nintendo didn't intend for them to be. Then we have the Possessors. Man, don't even get me started on the Possessors. Each Possessor takes on an object and acts as the final boss of each area. They're all memorable and enjoyable showcases of creativity, and some of them can even be genuinely challenging. Alright, to sort of sum up the gameplay and what I've said here, Luigi has to traverse these wonderfully creative mansions while fighting these hilariously wonderful ghosts and completing missions given to him by Professor Egad. I love this formula, as it's nice, quick, simple, and above all else, it's accessible. This game was a lot better for the casual audience that was just trying to have fun hunting ghosts with Luigi. Oh yeah, and I almost forgot how much I prefer the poltergust controls in this game. You really have to play the two games side by side to see most of the differences, but trust me, it feels so much better. Alright, this section has gone on long enough. Let's talk about why people don't like this game. So, why don't people like Dark Moon? Well, one of the biggest reasons is the atmosphere. Some people say that a genuinely creepy atmosphere had been swapped out for a cartoony, silly atmosphere. Now, I definitely see where they are coming from. The original mansion had been genuinely creepy at times, and sure, there are a lot less of those moments in Dark Moon, but I personally see this as an upside in most cases. It made the game a lot more inviting and overall, I think, more enjoyable for a younger audience. I mean, I know when I was younger, I enjoyed Dark Moon a lot more. A lot of people, like I said before, liked the creepy atmosphere of the original more, as this was really the first time Nintendo had ever dipped their feet into the horror genre. Well, unless you count Metroid, which made this game special. Here, they see that specialty being ripped away. But I think that this atmosphere was sacrificed for a more creative and overall enjoyable experience. Do I think they could have kept the creativity and the creepiness? Yeah, but I still think taking away some of the spookiness was an overall better decision. Another complaint people have is the fact that the game was mission based instead of the sort of Metroid style gameplay of the first game. Now I definitely see where people are coming from here, but you have to understand the limitations of the console that Nintendo was working with. It was on the 3DS, not the GameCube. Making a huge open world game just wasn't possible on this system. I personally believe that the mission system was implemented extremely well, as I never really felt like I was confined to a small area. I always felt like I was still exploring this huge mansion. The final complaint I'll bring up is people thought that the ghosts were just generic compared to those in the first game. In the first game, each of the portrait ghosts had their own personality. And if you scan them, you could sort of piece together their relationship with each other in the mansion. This was mostly abandoned in Dark Moon for a more generic sort of ghost format. Each of the ghost types in Dark Moon, excluding the great bosses, embody a certain stereotype, I'll say. They aren't nearly as personal or relatable as those in the first game, but they are still animated extremely well and somehow still have a ton of personality. I can certainly understand why people prefer the ghosts in the original, but I just enjoy seeing the ones in Dark Moon more. Overall, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is a great game that I think deserves more love. I can certainly see why you might enjoy the original more, but I encourage you to give this game a second chance after watching this video. Who knows? You might even enjoy it more than you did the first time. So, this is my video on Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. I hope you enjoyed it because I put a lot of work into this. I hope I was able to show you why I personally believe Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is an underappreciated masterpiece. And if you think I missed anything, let me know in the comments below. Okay, thanks for watching.